Welcome everyone back to the Yosan University 39 Gen podcast. I have actually two interesting and very awesome guests with me today. Now, Sabine, welcome back, and Leo, welcome to the podcast. Now, Leo, can both of you actually introduce yourselves really quickly and tell people a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Leo, I'm not a lady. You go first.
Hello, my name is Leo Lok, and I'm a clinician scholar of Chinese medicine. And in the last few years, I've been spending quite a bit of time with all my colleagues all around the world, diving deep and wide into many issues of Chinese medicine regarding its literature, its history, the interpretation of terms and concepts and historical ideas, where they came from. And now I'm with Sabine.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for coming on. Sabine, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, I started out as an academic, and it's always a good question to go back and go, I don't know. I started out with a PhD teaching at a university, and then I got a job at a Chinese medicine college and had so much fun, just like a little part-time job teaching Chinese culture or something. And then I worked for Paradigm Publications, and somehow I switched into really trying to be a bridge. So I'm not a licensed practitioner, but I've been teaching practitioners about the history and the culture. And for the last few years also teaching about the language, teaching practitioners how to read ancient Chinese, mostly the early literature. So I try and I love working with clinicians, and I come from a family of medical practitioners, but I'm not licensed. I don't treat people. I try and
But you have the knowledge.
Well, I have different knowledge. I have different knowledge. And that's why I love working with Leo, because Leo is this rare person where he's first and foremost a healer. I think, Leo, that's fair. That's your presence. And I actually was talking to the pastor yesterday, and I was telling him what I was doing, and he was like, "Are you a healer, or are you a teacher?" And I said, "Isn't that the same thing?" So what you're doing with the podcast, isn't that healing? What you're doing, Sean?
I think so.
I'm throwing it back at you.
No, I love that. We're passing that baton around. The Olympics are on right now. We're in the spirit of passing the baton. I think so. I think that at the end of the day, I was tutoring a student of mine, and the student looked at me, and she's like, and I was asking her, what is your core thing that you do? And at the end of the day, and she was answering, she's actually a contestant for Miss Universe here in Vietnam, and I'm helping her work with her English, which is a pretty cool thing. She's a really awesome person, good friend of my wife. And at the end of the day, I was asking her, what is your motivation? Who are you? She had to answer this question, who am I? And she's like, I have no idea. It's like, are you a singer? Are you an entertainer? And I said, at my core, I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. I'm a giver of knowledge, whether that be in the classroom, whether that be talking to a patient, whether that be making children's videos. I'm sharing information and empowering people. So I think that is, you are, by sharing of information, empowering people to heal and being a catalyst for their healing. So I totally agree, Yeah. But today we have a fun topic. When I reached out, you said that you had an upcoming workshop that you wanted to chat about, because there was a really interesting topic that you and Leo were working on. Can you tell me a little bit, what is this person and what is this topic that we're looking at today?
So Sun Simiao was a medical sage, or like Leo puts it, a medical ancestor. He lived in the 7th century. He wrote one of the most earliest, most important, most essential medical encyclopedias, the Beiji Tianjin Yao Fang, the essential formulas worth 1,000 in gold to prepare for emergencies or something like that. And I did my dissertation on this decades ago, not even really knowing what I was getting into. And part of his encyclopedia is a volume that is titled Yangxing, nurturing the inner nature, the inherent nature, the heavenly nature, nurturing your nature. And it is sometimes argued that Yangxing is the same as Yangsheng, which I'm sure you've heard that term. And I'm sure the listeners, Yangsheng, nurturing life. It's like preventative health, cultivating life, living with the seasons, breath work, dietetics, sexual cultivation, all of the stuff. And Sun Simiao puts a twist on it because he was not actually a professional clinical practitioner in the modern sense of the world. He was a initiated Taoist priest. He was a specialist in Buddhism. He was an advisor to the emperor. He was a very, very important figure in elite early Tang circles. So he has this beautiful synthesis of what I love that period in Chinese history because of the influence of Buddhism that had been present for a few centuries at that point. And then the early Tang was very cosmopolitan. So there was a lot of influence from India. And actually, Leo is, I mean, it's such a dream for me to have Leo have joined me. I've been working on this volume for decades, trying to produce a translation and publish it. And Leo and I has advised me on a bunch of my other books. Leo is great at reading the classical literature and finding textual connections, like plumbing the meaning of phrases. And it's just incredible for me to have found a partner. And at the same time, I hope that's okay, Leo. Can we get personal? Like,
Sure.
you have been I've gone through a hugely transformative process in the last few months, and you have given me so many tools from your deep understanding of Buddhism. So I feel like we are bringing Sun Simiao's work on this incredibly bizarre, complex, very, very difficult topic. It's very difficult to put into words. We're translating Sun Simiao's wisdom, and at the same time, my goal is always, I've learned, it's not enough if I just translate these texts. A normal modern person doesn't know what to do with the Divine Farmer's Classic of Materia Medica unless I explain it, or whatever the Yellow Emperor's Classic. It's not enough to just translate. It's about, what does this mean in clinic? How does that apply to a person who doesn't understand Han Dynasty or Tang Dynasty, ancient Chinese culture, or who doesn't even understand modern Chinese culture? So I've learned that we need to translate this to make it personally relevant for normal people, and for
Right.
for clinicians. How do we because this volume was written it was about cultivating the self, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And how, if at all, is it appropriate? How can we use this? How can a medical practitioner use this and possibly, if appropriate, apply this to a patient, when it was really written for advanced members of the elite, for Taoist cultivators, Buddhist meditators? Is it appropriate to bring that into your clinical context? And Leo is a clinician, so it's just been
That's awesome.
an absolute dream. Like, Leo and I have been meeting several times a week for hours and hours and hours on Zoom or whatever, and like just diving deep into this, and it's just been so much fun. So, Leo, I'm passing.
No, it was awesome. Leo, what drew you to Sun Simiao?
Yeah, I would like to approach, because I think Sabina really put it so beautifully, both in the personal terms, but also as a historian, so giving us context and history, and the framework of understanding where Sun Simiao came from historically,
Mm.
socially, and even in the religious terms. So, so I would like to kind of bring our audience in with a view or an identity of a clinician. Why is it that is so moving for me when I stand in the identity of a clinician? Right? Because as we're preparing for this course and this journey of this program this past few months, I have had to reread the passages many times
Mm.
over. Right? And what really struck me was there's so many instances where I just read one sentence and even a phrase and a vice, and I was like, oh, wait a second. I think that makes me think of a case, Jane, Dean, or somebody. And this, for example, I was reading this phrase and it says, when people are exercising, please be careful of not exceeding your physical capabilities.
Mm.
Right? I was like, wow, this is so relevant in California, where everybody was, into these boot camps and
Yeah.
these, whether it's yoga, whether it's weightlifting, whether it's powerlifting or CrossFit, right? And
Yep.
what happened when they came in is, or kung fu, and all sorts of martial arts, right? So they would
Yep.
say, oh yeah, I was doing well, I'm so strong. And then my
And then,
sensei and my teacher told me, oh, you should perfect your kick on the right side for using 100 reps or 200 reps. And usually is the 199th rep where they injured themselves,
yep.
right? So it was like, wow, this is so relevant. And then there's another one. It just kept coming, right? And it says, look at these recipes, because we have in Swiss, in this program, we're going to talk about just even like a one chapter exclusively on herbal supplementation, the Taoist elixirs,
Mm.
right? Fortifying the essence of the body, the Jing Qi Shen, and all that. And then he has a sentence in there and says, yeah, these formulas are great, but please be careful. Just because somebody else says it works great for them,
Yeah.
don't take it at face value and just follow them. You still have to use the principles of the medicine to discern whether it's suitable for you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right? I was like, this is exactly right. We have the superfoods, the super formulas, the ancient. Oh, we just discovered this drug or herb from the hills of the Himalayas or up in the Himalayas, right? Or from the depth of the ocean. This is going to be amazing. Look at so and so. They did so well on it. And your friend did so well. And your best friend did so well on it and lost 20 pounds in a week.
Yep.
You need to do it too.
And then you take it and you feel awful.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
there's even another dimension, which is the ethical dimension. So, and this whole class is about the sweet spot. It's about
Nice.
finding the sweet spot between over exercising. And then he says, but ultimately, you have to weigh. You have to engage in non engagement, or you have to practice non conscious action, however you want to translate that. And ultimately, it's about stillness. But there's
No.
like this sweet spot in between. There's always there's like a yin and a yang aspect to every one of his topics, whether it's dietetic, sexual cultivation, exercising, this this stretching, these yoga-like poses, everything, even the virtuous actions. So in dietetics, he says, he gives you all these formulas, and then he says, ultimately, you can take all the formulas, all the pills, the best pills in the world. It is not as good as your daily actions of virtue. So you can take all the pills in the world. It won't make a difference if you don't have the right mindset. So there's the one extreme, and then there's the other extreme. Right,
So
Leo? And
powerful.
and there is no, it's not, there is no right answer. It's like we're always trying to navigate what is the sweet spot. And I think it's the key about this class is going to be, there is no one goal, there's no one target. We're just refining our ability to sit between the poles of yin and yang, action, non-action, being hung up on virtuous action, and the ultimate goal of just emptiness and stillness. In sexual cultivation, being really conscious of all these taboos and all the things that you're not supposed to do, and all the ways in which sexual cultivation can supplement your jing and all of these things you can do, and at the same time, the opposite of that, whatever that is.
Yeah.
I don't know. Whatever that is.
There's something that's really interesting that I wanted to, as you're talking about this and as you're talking about going back. And one of the things that the other day I was watching for a class that I was having at Yosan. And we all had to watch a different documentary on health topics. And so I was thinking about something to look at. And I grew up in a blue zone. My parents lived in around the Loma Linda area, where the Seventh-day Adventists have their community that is vegetarian. They eat healthy, they live healthy. And, my whole family, like my mom's side, everyone had lived into their 90s. My mom's parents were both 94. Her grandparents were like 96. And it's just this insane longevity. And they just lived well. They didn't smoke, they didn't drink, they took care of themselves. And as I was watching the documentary, it was a lot of, I kept trying to watch it. I was like, all right, what's the tip in this episode? What is the thing that I can pull out from this? Because it was just anecdotal information of all these people and what they were doing. And like the first episode was in Okinawa, and they were like looking at, is it this, is it that? Mm-hmm. And they tried to highlight, okay, in Okinawa, they have this strong sense of community. And also there is some dietary things. It looks like these people all eat a purple yam, and that purple yam has some type of protective, qualities to it. Now, what's interesting is here I am in the same day and the age and time watching this documentary about cultivating health, cultivating wellness. And I'm sitting there trying to pull information out of it. And it's still distant to me, because when I'm watching the Okinawa episode, I'm sitting there going, hang on, dude, can I get purple yams here in Vietnam? Where can I buy a purple yam? Is that the thing? Do I need purple yams now? And I'm just like, oh, dude, where are the purple yams at? I don't know where to buy purple yams. And it was just like my mind is spinning, and I'm just like, oh, and I don't have this type of community. Am I dead? Am I in trouble here? And so all these thoughts going. And this is in the same time period. This documentary was released last year. Now, I can watch this. It is in my same time. Now, let's imagine how long ago did Sun Simiao live?
7th century.
7th century. So it's 1,300 years ago.
Yeah, 1,400
years ago. Yeah. 1,400 years ago. Let's imagine 1,400 years in the future, a distant civilization goes back and pulls up the Netflix archives. And they're like, we have found the documentary on blue zones. And they're watching it going, guys, what is texting? What is it? What is FaceTime? Like, hang on, they're not constantly connected with their consciousness at all times. It's just this vastly different understanding. So, I mean, it's so fascinating to me that you are pulling all of these health tips, and that so much is still extremely relevant to this time.
Yeah.
Now, go ahead. Sorry, I'll let you guys respond to that.
I'll just give a very concrete example of why it is still relevant, right? So and Sabine and I, we just did she has this translation group that she works with, and we just did a translation of a passage from the very same material
Yeah.
And in it, it was Sun Simiao spent so many sentences, or entire paragraph, talking about securing your living space so that it's free from these crevices or seams that leak wind and let wind comes in.
Interesting.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that is an ancient architecture, right? Tang Dynasty architecture, 1400 years ago. They were talking about all these how to secure the building and the room that you're in. So why did Sun Simiao spend so many precious words on just this one thing? Okay,
Yeah.
so and how did all the subsequent practitioners in Chinese medicine throughout the ages follow this and is honed into this, right? So
Yeah.
back now, come back to 21st century. Some years ago, I had a colleague who consulted me, and he says, I have a patient. He's been going around seeing all these wonderful teachers and really experienced practitioners. They gave herbs, they did acupuncture. It worked well for about 24 hours. And then the next time she came back, she's back in the same place again, having this neck pain.
Mm.
Right? And I was like, can you take a look at this? I sure. As I looked at the formulas and I looked at the acupuncture protocol or prescription. These are great, amazing practitioners, and everything looks great. There is no reason why this patient is not recovering. How is it that her recovery is not sustainable?
Mm.
It was effective for a period of time, but never sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, something else must be going on. So it reminded me of many. See, one of my the things that I'm familiar with is Jing Fang, the classical approach, right? The
Mm-hmm.
Shanghan Lun people. So I'm very familiar with the Shanghan Lun cases of all the master clinicians from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So there's a catalog of their cases in
Mm-hmm.
Chinese. I'm very familiar with those. And what it reminded me of is many of these old doctors, these master's doctors, they always ask their patients about the windows,
Mm.
where the windows are, and how do you sleep in relationship to your windows,
Mm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
I ask, like, go back and ask this patient, how did she sleep or how does she sleep? I Is there a possibility that she's sleeping with the windows open at night? And sure enough, she was sleeping on the side next to her husband, close to the windows which are open at night.
Mm.
So I said, according to what the clinical cases I've read in the 60s and the 70s and 80s and the masters, they always suspect that when the temperature dropped drastic, it's always a clear summer day. It was like hot summer day.
Mm.
It was so hot. So everybody had their windows and doors open. But then the temperature dropped unexpectedly or dramatically at night. And a chill draft came through and hit them,
Mm.
the patients, right? So I said,
Mm-hmm.
the one way to find out if this is the cause of the problem is that she repeatedly got injured again at night, is to move her to her husband's side and let
Mm-hmm.
her husband sleep on you know the side with the windows, and maybe close the window a little bit and just let the air circulate, because the husband was complaining about how hot the room was and we have
Mm-hmm.
to keep it cold at all times, right? And they did that, and sure enough, her problem disappeared.
Mm. There it is.
So that is the lineage of the potency and the amazing benevolence, I would say, of our medical ancestors. Such a little thing. Such a little thing. But Sun Simiao spent so much time on it.
And it's actually, when you look at it, for me, it wasn't that surprising that he spent so much time on wind, because I've lived in Taiwan. I'm used to Chinese culture. I specialize in gynecology, and wind is a huge topic in especially postpartum recovery. So just anybody who spent time in an East Asian context, right? I mean, I don't know about Vietnam so much, but I assume it's the same thing.
Same.
Because
Yeah.
wind is like a completely different pathogenic factor than it is in our Western culture.
100%.
In Neijing, the Chinese classic, it says 风为百病之长.
Exactly.
And
yeah.
Sabine, what that
Wind
would
is the
translate
cause of
to...
the 100 diseases. And I was reading that chapter while living in the Columbia River Gorge in the winter with Dr. Long, and we would get 100-mile-an-hour winds. And it was just, I was not supposed to be there. And it affected me in such a horrific way, emotionally. It was like wind. I got it. I got the perfect lesson on the evils of wind, being in the Columbia Gorge, in the wind tunnel, in the middle of winter. I was like, oh boy, yes, Dr. Long is right. This is, it's just a little example.
That's an amazing example. Well, what does Yangxing, and forgive me for my pronunciation, entail? What are his Sun Simiao's teachings on nurturing life? And how do I say that word correctly? What are the tones for that? Yangxing?
I think you said it perfectly. Yangxing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Woohoo! And what does it entail? What are some of the main concepts of this nurturing life from Sun Simiao?
Okay. We have a lifestyle. So we have moderation in activity, healthy living, emotional equilibrium.
Modulation and equilibrium.
Modulation is a beautiful term.
Yeah.
We have chi work, we have breath work, we have stretching, guiding, like it's called massage, but it's really more, what's a good
It's like modern yoga. It's like modern yoga.
Kinda, yeah.
It's a yogic stretching and
yeah. Then there's dietetics veering into alchemy. Then there's sexual cultivation.
Yeah.
Is that it? Sleep hygiene.
And what do you call interior design?
Meditation. But really, the question is, and we've been talking about this forever. It's like, what is the meaning of Yangxing? And I think really that's what we want to do for those 3 months. What does it mean to nurture? Like, there's a dimension that goes beyond nurturing. Like your physical health will be a side effect if you are able to really live in accordance with your Xing.
Interesting.
What is your Xing? Leo, you passed this on to me the other day, and I'm like, I don't know.
That is the beauty of the program, I think, that we're embarking on with our students in these 3 months, is that Sabine and I both have a lot of knowledge and we know enough of the landscape. You know, we're getting on the boat and getting to going, for a sail down the river. But we're never going to know what's going to pop up on the banks of the river. Right, we got this beautiful boat going. Everybody's on board. We tell you where to look. Look over there into the forest, on top of the trees. What do you see? Right, everybody has different perspectives, but we're on the same journey. Sun Simiao is not easy. Sun Simiao cannot be summarized so easily in one sentence or two. Right, he's complex. But his
Well, he's a
complexity,
sage. I mean, who are we
yeah,
to understand and explain? Who are we to guide a journey that was created by it's a program. I mean, discovering your Xing, that's like a program for sagehood or something. And
yeah.
I think we both, I
I
feel like a complete imposter. I feel like we're setting out into the dark ocean.
Can I
ah
throw one out there? It's like I feel like the three of us are all pretty intelligent people. Like I really feel that. I don't feel that it's a stretch to say that. There is, however, there are people that are just like, whoa. I mean, think about Isaac Newton. I'm going to take it to a Western background and culture here for a second. Isaac Newton, this person who was a great, everyone, oh yeah, discovered gravity. People don't understand. So Oxford shuts down. The universities in Europe shut down because of the Black Plague. So what does Isaac Newton do? He goes home. And since there's nothing to do, he invents calculus. Why not? Got some spare time. How about we create an entirely new form of math? Easy. You know, there are people that come along that are of such great wisdom and to the ability to learn from them. I mean, like you're saying, they are a sage. They have this. There is so much to understand. Like, I mean, I don't know if I don't believe that Isaac Newton left a diary, but if he did, or Da Vinci, you know, you start looking at these things of these people that were these great scholars, inventors, and it's just like, wow, wow, you know, to be able to gain a glimpse. And so with Sun Simiao's teachings, because there is so much of it that is chronicled, is written down, you know, versus, you know, we don't have, you know, 200 journals from Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, if only we did, that would be amazing, but we don't, you know. But from Sun Simiao, there is this written catalog. Am I right there?
No.
No, there's not. So tell me about it. Help me understand.
That's funny. Leo is like, yes, yes. And I'm like,
But
I am
no,
sorry.
talk to me. Help me understand.
I'm a historian. I'm a medical historian. He's a reflection of this amazing fountain of knowledge that was present in the early Tang
yeah
Dynasty. And
Okay.
when we really analyze his text, it's a compilation of.
So
yes
I think, I mean, a lot of the
yes
texts are lost, so we don't know. There's no proof, but I have found so many textual parallels, and Leo is the king of textual parallels. And a lot of times, Sun Simiao's writings are actually somewhat corrupted. So in order to
Tell me.
translate them, I've had to do Google searches. I've had to search phrases and find other texts, mostly in the Taoist canon, that contain passages that are almost literally identical. So
Interesting.
I am sorry to.
So it's a culmination.
Yeah.
He was pulling together the knowledge
Yes.
of the time. So
yes
it was like kind of creating the internet of that time.
Yes, if I may, one of the
Please.
geniuses of Sun Simiao is not that he came up with all this knowledge, but as an expert compiler, he not only collected these teachings, but he contextualized them
That's
and
awesome.
put them into this beautiful flow. And he added his own sort of summaries and synopses, and he knew how to place them in a flow that you know, because as textual researchers, we know many of these passages are not his. It can come from a lot of other places as well, because there are other parallel texts and titles that contains the same almost verbatim passages. But his genius is to put all these pieces together in a beautiful flow, and it is supplemented and embroidered into this theme that is his.
And that's the
Because
sweet spot, right? That equilibrium between the
Yeah.
abstract, the high flying, it's between heaven and earth. It's really what humanity, right? We're between heaven and earth.
Yeah.
So there's texts that talk about the heavenly dimension. And then there is the earthly embodiment. We all live in a body that experiences pain, that needs material food, that sweet spot. So, Leo, this is good. You just
Right?
I love it.
really
Because
nailed his genius.
his genius is because he's not just this abstract, big world, huge world, spiritual, blah, blah, blah. You look at the text, he's so meticulous and comprehensive. How would you drink your water after a meal? How many steps would you take? Why don't you take the steps before? Why do you take the steps after? How do you make this? It's like every little vignette of your daily moments is woven into his text. It's so meticulous. So you can even, through his writing, kind of revisualize what life was like during the Tang Dynasty. And at the same time, please, go ahead.
Please. No, at the same time, I want to hear this thought.
At the same time, he's so relevant because these actions of drinking, eating meals, drinking soup, going to the bathroom, not going to the bathroom, having sex, not having sex every day, not having sex for 2 months, are still exactly relevant today in the 21st century. We're still, because we're humans, we have this physical body, we have eyes. He talks about even, using your eyes when you look at things. How much time? What kind of attitude should you have? How would you hold your gaze? When you're listening to music, what can go wrong and what can go right? You see how detailed he was? Every little detail of our sensorial experience is at once Tang Dynasty, but all at the same time timeless. Because as long as we have eyes, we'll encounter the same challenges.
Yeah.
But today, cell phones.
And then at the same time, so he has all these crazy little details. And I think it's that tension between knowledge and technique and rational skills and the artistry. Like in terms of you guys as doctors, as clinicians, right? You need to have this technical knowledge to even ask a patient about wind or about their diet or about their sex or whatever. And at the same time, there's the art of the healer. That's just that healing presence, whether you're a teacher or a singer or whatever it is that you do in your world. So there's this higher level of being, and there's a joy and a freedom that comes from this other way of being in the world.
I love that.
And I'll add one more, if I may.
Please do.
One more.
Sean, you'll never get another word in.
No, that's great. Makes my job easy.
To make that even more Sun Simiao, I think there's even another dimension or another taste to his writing and his teaching, and that is benevolence.
I love that.
Compassion and benevolence. Remember, we get a little geeky and historian, kind of historical here, right? As I told Sabine before, years ago, what makes Sun Simiao's medical writings distinct from his predecessor, from, say, the Neijing, is that he introduced a dimension of benevolence and mercy and compassion and well-wishing to the world in the flavor of Mahayana Buddhism.
That's insane.
Which we never seen before in Chinese medical text, because the Neijing is all about the laws of heaven and earth. Follow it, you will thrive. If you go against it, you die. End of story. It was that type of attitude and tone of voice. But when it comes to Sun Simiao, remember, everybody says the oath, Sun Simiao's physician's oath. Well, it's really not an oath, but we'll let it slide for right now. In Da Yi Jing Cheng, right, he talks about this great, heartful compassion for the less
what it
fortunate
means to
people.
be a great physician. For those of you who don't know Chinese, the sincerity of the great physician.
Yeah. It is this outpouring of care and trying to help people when they didn't even know that they could get into trouble, and make sure that the disadvantaged, the marginalized are all taken care of. This is unprecedented in our medical history.
Yeah.
Never was there such outpouring of limitless compassion for all the troubled and the suffering in the world. That is distinctly, for me, Buddhist.
Yeah.
This Mahayana Buddhist.
And you can tell that in that preface. I mean, the language is very Buddhist. It's obvious.
Yeah. And so that's what Sabine and I think believe we resonate with. So there's all the technical details, right? Living technical details, herbal technical details, clinician relevant things, all in there. You cannot escape it. Every sentence is there. But at the same time, what envelops it and what nurtures it and what carries it is the deep and wide and endless benevolence and compassion for the suffering of sentient beings. That's what I think makes Sun Simiao unique, and that's what resonates with me and Sabine, I think, at the deep level.
So beautiful. One of the things that, let me ask you this. If you had to think about one practical tip that from Sun Simiao that you would say, hey, when I read it, this is the thing that I would go, people need to hear this. What's one practical tip that you pull from this into your own life and would like to share with people? Leo, you want to go?
I think modulation is
That's the perfect term. Thank you for that, Leo. I'm a word person. Modulation.
Please, you want to take over that?
No, modulation.
Yes. Modulation, I would say. How all his writings, I mean, if we were to take the essence of it, it's about how do you modulate between all the extremes, and how what life throws at us, and our emotional, mental, physical, spiritual response to the flux of life, all these events of life, death, a birthday, winning the lottery, getting hit by a car, all these very humane and human incidents is going to always cause us to flux, to go up and down, left and right. And he gave these exquisitely detailed guidance. And when you move to the left, how do you come back to the center? When you push to the right, how do you recover? You get thrown up, how do you come back down? If you've sunk too far, how do you lift yourself up? And that
it was so funny. That's what came up for me personally as well.
Please.
For obvious reasons, because I've just gone through a couple of really intense emotional weeks. And I thought what you were going to say, Leo, for a clinician, is the sexual cultivation piece.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I thought you were going to go.
If I may use another few minutes on that.
Please do.
It's the same...
Sean, we're just sitting back here.
It's the same spirit.
Getting some popcorn. I'm good.
It's the same framework. Because Sabine knows how deeply or strongly I feel about this. Because look at the landscape of our social media right now on YouTube, right? Nowadays, just like what happened maybe 20, 25 years, 30 years ago, when all these ancient Eastern sexual cultivation knowledge and techniques and supplements started get filtering into the West. Just like it was 30, 20 years ago, there was very little critical thinking, and warnings about the side effects of each of these approach. Everything is, oh, it's going to be fine. You're going to be the superstar. You're going to be supercharged into higher consciousness by preserving your jing and your essence. It's all going to be good. But I've been following this type of community for 25 years and know a lot of teachers and students and practitioners, and some of them ended up in my practice. No, it's not going well. A lot of people are injured because they didn't know that our medical ancestors have gone through the same process and have recorded in clinical cases what could go wrong. And that part, that dimension of the literature and knowledge is almost completely unknown to our modern colleagues in the West.
At the
Nobody
same
knew.
time, there's 2 chapters on sexual cultivation. And one is the Yellow Emperor's taboos. So one is all about what you shouldn't do at a certain age, when the moon is full, when you're intoxicated, and it's all about the dangers. And the other chapter is about supplementing and boosting. So
Yeah.
it's about taking advantage of sexual intercourse as a tool for cultivation. And
Yeah.
so
And
it can
Yeah.
it can go both ways. Again, the sweet spot.
Yes. I think the beauty of this course is going to go into that, and I'm going to present, this is good, what could go wrong. You know, at the Ming Dynasty and Qing Dynasty, we have these cases of famous doctors saying, well, this is what can go wrong. And this is so precious because this information or misinformation is being spread so quickly and so widely right now through social media. So many of our colleagues who are clinicians will encounter, if not have already encountered, people who are compromised and injured through these misinformed practices. And I would love to share my own insight to as a basic guidance for our colleagues of how to navigate and help people out there.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, and
so
I think that it's
please.
No. There is imagine you have a weight room and you take in a bunch of people who have never seen a weight room, and you're like, just go have fun. I've seen videos on Instagram about people doing things that are definitely not safe. And they're just, someone's like, flying around on the pull-up machine, just like, whoa, I'm bouncing up and down. And guaranteed, if they use whatever device or tool it is incorrectly, they can damage themselves. But if you gain some basic training, that gym can suddenly supercharge you into a very strong, resilient person. And so it is, it's not about the tools, but about knowing how to use them, the right way to use them. And kind of focusing that. And I mean, this is with sexual cultivation is something that is not in any way mentioned in Western medicine. And this is an area that's fascinating to me because, with the history of Chinese medicine, there is this idea of cultivation about how the sexual act and depletion versus Western medicine. Are we making kids? Are you done making kids? It's like that. That's pretty much it. It's like, or is it for just purely for pleasure? It's like there are these things, but it's not even discussed. The concepts aren't even looked at.
Exactly. It's about even knowing how to ask the right questions.
Yeah. And it's not interwoven into the full dimension of our health.
Yeah.
And not knowing how it is relevant to, how is that relevant to, say, depression? How is that relevant to PTSD? How is that relevant to chronic fatigue? there is not even an awareness that there might be a connection.
Yeah.
And if, people are gung-ho, these young men especially, about some of these practices, and just like with the supplements, just like with the superfood, if a few people gain certain advantage or certain performance enhancement out of it, then they think is golden, is just the elixir, the perfect elixir that can do no wrong, not knowing that the dangers lie just right ahead.
Why do you think that people should be studying this? What are some
Well,
of the go ahead.
so for me personally, the last few months, I mean, I've been trying to wrap my head around this volume for years. People have asked me to translate this and to publish the book for decades. And I'm always like sitting with it and I'm like, I'm not ready. And I'm glad I haven't, because I wasn't ready. And I'm still not ready, but that's why we're doing the course, because the course will be a collaboration and a collective effort by all of us together. And I can feel how sitting with this material so intensely for the last few weeks and months has transformed me. It's just given me this awareness, this other way of being in the world that takes me out of my comfort zone and challenges me with everything I do. Like, I just moved and I got totally excited about my chainsaw. I've got several chainsaws and I completely, I'm like back to Sabine the farmer mode from 30 years ago. And no, I'm not in my 20s anymore. Exactly what you said about the weight room. At the same time, then everybody was like, Sabine, you need rest. You can't move because I keep dislocating the stupid rib. And I'm like, I am not the Constitution who can sit still. It drives me nuts.
Yeah.
So I just went to a practitioner who told me to go swimming. And I said, oh, but I went swimming 2 weeks ago and I popped the rib back out from swimming. And he's like, oh no, you need the swimming. You also need to eat liver. So I'm like, okay, I fortified myself. I had a huge dinner with liver. And then I've been swimming, I've been eating liver and going swimming every day. And I'm super happy. So it's like this sweet spot where I don't have an answer for you. And I wouldn't be able to tell anybody else what precisely it was that Sun Simiao told me. But it was just this challenge of, yes, there is the embodied presence in the world. And that's what I think most of our medical colleagues, they function at that. Their clinical practice aims to allow the body to function in the world. But there is the earth and then there's the heaven dimension. And the other thing is the virtue, the piece of virtue, that it's not just about, it is about individual spiritual cultivation and finding that piece of stillness and emotional equanimity, just by me meditating under my tree or by the beach or whatever. And at the same time, there is that really strong, like, I love the fact that what Leo called compassion, that Sun Simiao, I think what today we would call love, divine love. There's a undercurrent here of this desire to alleviate suffering and to bring healing. And that's maybe not the words he uses, but he calls it the great physician. So is it the great physician, or do we just call it a real healer? Like, just that subtle change in language, I think, brings it into the modern world. And we can talk about compassion as ren or humaneness, whatever that Confucian quality. But I think the modern translation is really love. And we don't think of Sun Simiao as somebody who advocates love. Like, we don't
Maybe
think about... Gosh.
The great lover. Maybe we should translate it as the great lover. That's instead awesome. Of the great physician. I think from a clinical standpoint,
Yeah.
I would say that the benefits for our clinician colleagues to dive into this material is that it will, I believe, will supercharge one's clinical practice in a very concrete ways. Because by going through these aspects of life in these minute details, which a lot of our colleagues might have forgotten about or was never
Mm.
introduced to in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
not realizing that, wow, this aspect of life, this way of doing things can actually introduce injury
Mm-hmm.
into a patient's life. Oh, I have a case like that. Let me try it out. You know, we're just so focused on just herbs, herbs, herbs,
Yeah.
needles, 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 not realizing that like a huge percentage of the problems actually came from life's moments,
Yeah.
which we summarily call lifestyle. But the Western way of phrasing
Yeah.
lifestyle is too general, is too
Mm-hmm.
generic, too vague. It's like, did you walk after you had a meal?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a really full meal before you go to sleep? And what
Mm.
kind of meal was it?
Mm-hmm.
Because using that aspect alone, I have, in the years past, I've been able to help a dozen cases, recalcitrant, mysterious cases, just go like completely disappeared, just using that one piece of information alone without any herbs or acupuncture points.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Okay. I want to throw this question back at Sean.
Okay.
I'm just wondering how this is all landing with you.
Well,
I'm
for
putting you on the
me,
spot. I'm sorry. But
no problem. It's good.
here we
It's good to
are.
have it
This is
thrown
the
back at me.
chance to have a three-way
Yeah.
conversation.
What I would say is that as someone studying and as someone that's looking to help people in the future, whatever tools, any great person stands on the shoulders of giants. And if we are able to really gather this information, I mean, for me, I would sit there and love to just distill a lot of these teachings down and go, what is it that's applicable to my life? How can I best get my state of absolute wellness and a homeostasis or an equilibrium of sorts? Because I think that for me, the thing that I notice that has caused me the most challenges in my health is when I get out of balance. When I'm too far to the right or too far to the left, those are the times that I just get destroyed, flying back to Asia and I'm, on 23
Mm,
hours of travel and, I slept some, but I'm not. And then suddenly I'm still jet lagged a week after I flew back from Vietnam. And, my throat's a little scratchy. And I'm like, hang on, if it wasn't for that travel and getting out of balance, there wouldn't have been the space for that pathogen to attack. And
mm-hmm,
so, for me, I was like, well, what do I need to do? Get back to sleeping well, eating well, drinking lots of water, and getting back to my yoga, meditation, and exercise. It was about finding that balance again. So you're speaking my language. And
And
I
at the
think,
same time, you've got a bunch of musical instruments in your background. So there's
yes,
the
I do.
power of joy.
Well, that was the thing I was thinking today. I've been
And
doing
those
too
beautiful
much.
pictures.
Yeah, my daughter's paintings.
That's really, so
oh,
there's a lot of
Yeah.
wow.
love. Like,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, the thing I was thinking is I'm doing so many things. I have this project and that project and this. And
Yeah.
today I made this decision to do less media, but to do the media that I'm doing well and to find more joy. I was looking at my piano and I was like, my guitars I haven't played in months because I've been so focused on trying to get this or that. And I have a couple jobs that I'm looking at back stateside as I'm trying to move. And one of them was a very high paying job, but yet it would pull me away from my studies. It would pull me away from the media that I'm building with my daughter. And that is something that is so, it is my ikigai, my meaning, and I think that for me, that is that balance. All the money in the world cannot make me want to follow what's my nature,
Mm-hmm.
this here.
There
If
you
I
That's the
go.
could,
Xing. That's
There
the
you
Xing,
go.
right?
that's
That's
the
the
thing.
Yangxing.
That's
This
you
here.
just
Yeah.
demonstrated
You,
the power of this topic. That's your
Yeah.
sing
yeah.
right
Because you're
there.
trying to nurture it. You're trying to
Yeah.
honor it and nurture it.
And
And
that's the key to longevity.
yeah. If I
Yeah.
go down that path might
Not the
make me
yoga,
permanent.
not the diet, not the clean food.
It's
There you
that
go.
thing.
It's
It's that
you
thing.
making art
City
with your
Slickers.
daughter.
Do you ever watch City Slickers? Back in the day, Billy Crystal. And it's a great old 80s movie. And Billy Crystal is this guy who's on midlife crisis, and and his two friends who are also in their midlife crisis go out on this cowboy ranch experience. And so essentially they go out and they are a bunch of guys from the city who are driving these cattle from point A to point B as a track, right? And there's this old grizzled cowboy that's taking him across, and the whole time he's just staring at Billy Crystal like he's gonna kill him. And then but he doesn't. Obviously, it was just the personality. And then Billy Crystal and this guy kind of finally hit it off, and he's like, "What's the meaning of life?" And the old cowboy was like, "This." And then the cowboy died shortly thereafter and didn't ever tell Billy Crystal what this was. And that was part of the fun of the movie, as the guy died. But Billy Crystal's character eventually figures it out. This one thing is different for everyone. Your thing. For me, the experience of making videos with my daughter for my channel, Ilani's Little World, is so fun. Is so validating, is so enlivening. And my whole life led up to that. I love Chinese medicine, but I couldn't escape the fact that I taught children for years until finally I was like, you know what? This must just be part of me, but I don't want to teach in a classroom. That's not what I'm vibing on. So I made this YouTube channel, and like everything else is secondary to that. And that one thing for each of us is different,
Yeah.
and I think, and if what you're saying is resonating with me, is like part of what Sun Simiao was telling people was to find that thing and then cultivate it and love it.
Yeah, and don't get confused and then betray it and then use all the elixirs and all the yoga stuff and the sexual cultivation stuff to compensate for the problems that was caused by that betrayal. That's what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
Is that you have to get it the cause and effect right.
Wow. Where can people learn more about this? You guys are going to be doing this workshop. Where can people turn to look for some of this?
happygoatproductions.com/nurturing our nature.
Awesome. Well, this has been a
Or always get in
masterclass.
touch with me. And
If you
for
can,
me,
come.
what I'm getting out of this is I'm looking at, music and your daughter, and it's kind of like, I love kids. And I used to be a musician. And I'm looking at my background and it's books. I'm like, oh man, maybe it's time for me to nurture my nature a little in a different. But that's what this class is. I mean, our work has been so transformative. That's what it's bringing up. What is my nature?
Yeah.
And how do I nurture that? So thank you.
Right,
I want to thank you because I love my daughter and I love music. So I'm gonna have to pull my instruments out after this.
Life is more simple than we want to make it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to step outside, smell the wind, but don't get too windy.
Come join us and have fun.
Yeah.
If you can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.